Lovely.
Okay, welcome everybody to Financial Wellbeing Part 2 with Liz McLardy. We're sort of halfway through and there is another kind of final Financial Wellbeing Part 3 next week as well. I'll put some little links in the chat box as well about registering for next week's one and also becoming a member of the Postgraduate Association. So yeah, take it away, Liz.
Lovely. Thank you, Alison. So good morning, everybody. So nice to have you here, and a lot of familiar names that I can see from last week. So that's brilliant. So yes, thanks, Alison, for the introduction. So yeah, we're here at part 2. So this series of workshops that we're delivering is a 3-part series. And I've titled it sort of the Financial Wellbeing Foundations. So it's the foundations, giving you some really foundational tools and techniques and things to think about for really helping improve your financial well-being. So last week we went through 3 tools really to help you understand where you are financially. So I'll do a little bit of a recap today on that, and then we'll move into the topic for this week. So welcome back, and obviously welcome to anybody who wasn't here last week as well. Was great if you've been able to listen to the first webinar, but if you haven't and you're just coming in with no other prior knowledge, that's perfectly okay as well. We'll talk through and reflect on last week, but you can always go back and obviously if you haven't received the worksheets, you should have, so Alison wonderfully sent those out to everybody who attended and registered last week. So they're a really important tool to at least work through as we go through this webinar series, and you can modify and do what you want with those. So welcome back. Giving you this perspective of where we are. So we've had a look at last week of really understanding where you are financially. So it's really important when you're wanting to improve your financial situation or get sort of a better understanding of being able to be clear about where you are before you start making any decisions about what you want to change, goals that you want to set, which is really what we're going to focus on today. But it's really important to be able to take stock and understand where you are financially. So those financial wellbeing worksheets have those 3 tools that we worked through, and today we're going to then build upon that. So hopefully many of you went away and tinkered away with the worksheets, and I know there's a lot of work in them, so it may not be that you've got to do it at all, that's okay, but at least we'll still move on and move through the steps, but know that you can still go back and update and do your detailed analysis, because I know that first step does take some time. And so today we're going to then look at, okay, based on that information, what are some of the goals that you want to set for yourself over the next 12 months? And then in our final session next week, we're going to look at some strategies on helping support you to achieve those goals. So a little bit of a reflection from last week. Some of these little tiny snippets here of the worksheets might be familiar to some of you. I really wanted to just get an idea and a bit of a sense from everybody. If you use your little annotate function in Zoom, I don't know if you've used it before, but you can use it to kind of draw in the 3 white boxes that I have there to kind of tick or something to indicate which of those that you may have been able to work on. I don't know if you want to have a go, anybody who's, so it's at the little navigation bar that's in Zoom where you show your video, there's along there, there's a little pencil, and if you choose the pencil, you can then use it to add in. Lovely, thanks Matt. So Matt's got that under control there. Thank you. You don't have to indicate your name, but that's brilliant. That's a really good way to do it. So you can have just to indicate in each of the boxes maybe which ones that you were able to complete since I introduced them to you last week, just to give me a little bit of a sense of how people were able to work through. Brilliant, Kelly. Wonderful. So that's really nice to see. So just in terms of that recap, what we, as people are indicating what they were able to do, you were able to then obviously go into the first worksheet, which was letting us get an idea of where we are. So what is it that we own? What is it that we owe, to get that sort of sense of what is your financial position? So that's that first box. The second is doing that emotional audit, so to speak, understanding, what are our emotions around money, what are our thoughts and feelings. And I know that that's also a big topic that's really hard to do in a week when we're all very busy, but at least it gets you started and gets you thinking about, some of the things that I guess the base from which you're currently approaching and your relationship with money. So you've got a sense of that. And then the third is also a big project in itself, is looking back over the past 12 months. So great to see that some of you were able to do that task as well, which involved downloading transactions over the past 12 months and then populating what is commonly looked at is kind of a budget, but it's what we looked at we looked at as saying it's what the past was, looking back at the past 12 months. So having done that exercise from last week, and if you haven't been able to do it or you weren't here last week, no problem. This is a really still important step that I really encourage everybody to do. And probably just hearing me talk about the three elements there, to some it might be like, whoa, that's a lot of work. But the value in which you gain from going through that process and the information that you will receive will really, really help to inform, when you're thinking about financial goals and things that you might like to change. It's going to help inform you and let you be aware of what are some of the things that you might like to change. So I don't know if anybody feels comfortable in this forum to share maybe what they discovered. So Kelly, I know that you've ticked all of them and it sounds like you've been able to go through and complete them. Was there anything particular that you came across that maybe you weren't aware of, or something that was helpful about going through that process? You can share it in chat if you're helpful, or you.
I know, that's all right.
Talk, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it was quite interesting, I think, to kind of sit down and actually think about like each area.
Yeah.
But I actually, so I did it as like my husband and I together and just kind of sat down and it was quite interesting. My emotional stuff was probably very enlightening about how I am with money. Side note, my parents got divorced and we were super young and we had lots of money and used to do 4 holidays a year and had our own company and stuff. And then it all went down the gurgler. And so my mum has been so focused about money and paying off her houses and super and that sort of stuff. So that's obviously come off and rubbed off on me. Just like when I was actually thinking about how I am with money now.
Yeah, great.
So that was quite enlightening and interesting. And then our in and outflow, we just recently bought an investment property. So then just putting all of the money onto the screen and then seeing the little amount left on the net inflow and outflow was a bit terrifying. But then I had to be like, everything's paid. Like the house is paid, the baby's in daycare, there's food on the table, everything's paid. We still have money available, which I think was comforting, especially with everything going up. We're still okay. So it was very interesting.
Oh, that's brilliant. My goodness. Yeah. So you've really well described the value of each of those 3 tools brilliantly. And fabulous. And yes, I'd certainly encourage, if you are in a relationship, of course, if you're married, it is something that you would do together. It may not be that you actually sitting down in front of Excel and doing it together, but one person might prepare some of the financial stuff, like actually put the sheets together, and then I really encourage you to sit down and look at the numbers and the figures together, which sounds like Kelly's done, which is so valuable, because you're both then literally looking at the same page, looking at the same figures, and you will have different reactions and thoughts and feelings about your situation. And it's really good to prompt and initiate those conversations, which is fabulous. So sounds brilliant what you've worked through, and so wonderful to hear that, yes, as I acknowledged last week, that we do bring a lot of our intellect, we think, to managing money, but the emotional side of us, we need to bring our whole being, our whole selves to how we manage our money for it to get to a point of being healthy. So we need to acknowledge, and we often don't give ourselves time and space to acknowledge those emotions. And particularly if I was to work through with somebody one-on-one, we certainly do look back and reflect on what was the childhood relationship with money. How did we see it? What was the feelings and thoughts? Because a lot of that obviously feeds into how you're thinking and interacting with money now. And it's not to say it's good, bad, or other, but it helps you to understand yourself And of course, when you're doing it with a partner, it's helping you to understand them as well, which I'm sure was really enlightening as well for your husband, hearing sometimes we may not have even shared some of these stories with our partners because we just haven't been prompted to do it. Sometimes we feel it's private as well, or it's things that you don't want to bring up, but it can be really helpful to better understand somebody and where they're coming from. And you get to really understand their patterns with money. So people who might be savers might have seen that a lot, you know, in a family growing up, that money was challenging, so they save and they hoard. Sometimes you can have also two family members who I've had clients in the past, two family members coming from the same family, but that they end up having different relationships with money. One might be a spender, one might be a saver, but there's all sorts of different reasons for that. But it helps you to understand yourself. And hopefully that, what I was really trying to highlight last week, is that compassionate self-awareness. So we're not doing this process to beat ourselves up, to criticize, to be judgmental. It's really to support ourselves and each other, so that it's a process of increasing awareness, which is really amazing, which I can hear that Kelly's done. So not only have you better understood, you know, where you are, with your dollars and cents, but your emotions and why. Also thinking about that, why you are and how that relationship has come from and is being sort of anchored in childhood, which is completely understandable. And then to look into the inflows and outflows after the last 12 months. There's no, like I said last week, there's no good or bad. It just is what it is. And then it's for you to make a decision about how you feel about it. So as you kind of looked on at your inflows and outflows and saw, oh, there's not much left, it can be perfectly healthy to not have much left. That's called a zero-based budget. So you've assigned every dollar you earn to a purpose. So you've given some of that earnings the purpose of housing yourselves, feeding you. You've got some going towards an investment for longer term wealth accumulation. So that's actually a really positive thing. And I like how you reflected on that too, that you didn't sort of get stuck and get down and think, oh, but you could actually see that was a really positive thing, which is fabulous. So in hearing that example, I don't know if anybody else had any others that they wanted to share. Let me know if you do, through the chat, or if you want to come on using your mic. So I can.
Oh, hi Liz.
Hey,
I've just written something in chat.
Yeah,
it's kind of it's a pretty big share. Oh, I don't know, but doesn't matter. It just is what it is, and that's. So, I mean, things are looking a little bit more positive. Worked on the spreadsheet this morning, and I'm a little bit more hopeful that I can just be more of a self-manager with that kind of thing, but also for my family, if that makes sense, because there's times of transition for a lot of people in my family at the moment. So, I feel like things are looking okay, and there's just kind of my mental health side that just needs constant practicing of kind of self-care and emotional regulation techniques, which I think will gradually get better. That's my hunch.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for showing that. Yeah, it's brilliant. So, and really nice to also acknowledge that, of course, we're all very different in terms of where we're at with our money, our relationship with it, our current circumstances, also our values, what we're hoping to achieve, and that would be reflected through this kind of process as well. So no two peoples are going to be the same, and as I really reiterating, it's not that one's better or worse. I think, Matt, as you said, it is what it is. This process gives you that value of being able to see the facts of what is happening with your money at the moment. And then in that position of awareness, you can then start to make decisions about, is this how I want it to continue? Or are there things that I want to change? And you can actually start to see and have the power over the things that you want to change because you've got the figures in front of you. So in that third, looking at your inflows, outflows, you can see where your money is going, and you can start to change if there are things that you want to change. So if you can see that money is literally escaping and running away from you in terms of maybe, and these are really generalized examples, but it might be eating out. I know that's quite a common one for people. So then you go, right, that's enough. I'm not going to spend however much it is. If you calculate it over the last 12 months, I've spent X amount of money on eating out. That isn't something that I want to continue. And then that can start to feed into what we're working on today, which is setting some goals for ourselves for the next 12 months. And once we're clear on what it is that we want to do or want to achieve, we can then look at how do we create systems, which obviously, as you're saying, Matt, really involve self-care as well, making sure that whatever the goal is that we're setting for ourselves, we support ourselves to achieve. Not only the financials, but the emotional, mental health issues around it too. So that's really, really, really great. And this process of going through and understanding where you are financially, checking in with the emotional side of things, and then also looking back over the last 12 months, it's actually a really important practice that I would encourage everybody to do at least once a year. And it may be a time, maybe it becomes November, because we're doing this now, and you get into a habit of doing it each year to sort of check in as an annual sort of practice to say, right, where am I? You can look back to where you came from. So this first tool that you've just learned, that balance sheet, that personal balance sheet, gives you a snapshot of point in time, and you've got that now for October or November, which is the date for which you've done it. And in 12 months' time, you can do that again, and you will see the change in your net value. And it's not to say that we're always, well, we'd like to see it increase, but there could be good reasons why it might decrease as well. So we've got to remember that there's lots of different things that people are wanting to do in their life. And there may be something that you're saving up for, and that you're going to then spend that money. If it's a big holiday for whatever reason, or you're purchasing a home, you might take on more debt. You might go and study again. So it's really individual in terms of what you would be wanting that balance sheet to look like. But you can certainly start to set those goals for yourself, which is wonderful. And again, with the emotional audit coming in, at least I would be encouraging, once a month, if you can get into the practice as well, of just increasing the awareness, having a time that you might be able to journal or talk about it with a close relative or friend if there is something that's triggering you. And of course, mental health support as well if you need it, to talk about some of those underlying challenges that you might have with your relationship with money. So Matt, I don't think that yours are that uncommon as well. I know that you've shared here in the chat too about some of those beliefs that we're also unfortunately brought up with, and we see through movies, that the villain was always somebody who was rich. So we're going to have this negative association with having wealth. So a lot of us have that, and we need to work through, is that a healthy thing to have? Is that also, where is the evidence of that? Yes, we're in the media, we're shown and reinforced that belief, but there's also a lot of people who are wealthy that do a whole lot of good in the world. And money is an important part of life. We need to look after ourselves and try not to be a burden on others. And we can also use that money for a whole lot of good. So challenging some of those beliefs alongside, achieving these financial goals is really important. So yeah, really, really great to be able to take stock. And as I said, encourage you to do this again in 12 months' time. And you can come back, if I'm delivering these again in 12 months' time, you can come back and we can go through the process as well and check in and see, how did everybody go? How did we go in achieving the goals? And that's a bit where Matt is. So he came through and did these workshops last year and is now back and can see how much he's progressed. And also, some things, particularly some of those underlying emotional triggers and beliefs, they do take time for you to work through them, to untangle them, unpack them, challenge them. And so the expectation that things have to happen very quickly, I really discourage that, that it's, much more healthy to take your time with them. Okay, so I think that's enough of a reflection from last week, but still really, really valuable. I'm really, really pleased to hear and anybody else who's I think we'll move on here, although I'm sure there may be some other stories as well for people to share, but at least that gives us a really good indication of the value of what we did and that hard work, because it does take time. And for those who haven't done it, I hope that it's going to inspire you to find some time in the next week or the coming months to do this process yourself as well and do the work. Sorry, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit as well, but this is really the key thing that I'm hoping that comes out of having gone through and completed those first 3 worksheets, is to help you to be more aware of particular things. And I think from hearing some of those examples already, some of it's to do with you increasing your awareness about, you know, what your situation is, you know, where your money is going, what are some of your emotions. And this is what we want to get to today. So it's what are you aware of, and then what are you ready to change? And really important there, spent a bit of time thinking through the words on this slide. So it's about what you're ready to change as well, which is important. I know that there may be a whole lot of things that you feel like you do want to change, but I want to focus on the things that you're ready to change, because we're here in this webinar series going to focus on creating short-term goals. So of course, there's lots of things we want to achieve over the longer term as well, but I really want something tangible that you can achieve in the next 12 months, and being ready to change that is really important. So in the chat, does anybody want to share or add whatever you're comfortable with? Again, maybe one thing that helped you to become more aware of. So I know Matt and Kelly that you shared, that you obviously completed those worksheets. Anybody else as well, if they want to add in what going through that process you've become more aware of and what you're ready to change as well, would be great for us to just get a little bit of a sense of what people are wanting to focus on. You can also use your audio if you want to, rather than type, if you'd like. Kelly?
I think it was me, it was just seeing areas that we can rein it in. If we wanted to focus that money in other places. And I think, yeah, and then looking at like the future stuff, like, you know, like you just kind of think about next week or the week after, but like long term, where we want to be financially for our family. So that's kind of where we're at the moment after that.
Yeah, great. And I'm sure you, and I won't get into it, but I'm sure there'll be specific, when you sort of say you want to rein in some things, I'm sure there's quite clear from that process what some of those expenses are, perhaps.
Yeah. And I think it was just looking at, those things that you can negotiate on, like insurances, like we pay a butt ton on insurance, calm down. So looking at things like that, all that energies, like all those obvious things where you can kind of, you know, every kind of pinch a dollar here type thing. And just putting a little bit more time into those sort of things. I think making that effort to actually review the car insurance as opposed to just keep going with the same one. So I'm pretty good at that now, but we probably just need to just pay a little bit more attention to it, I think, for especially the coming year.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I must say, and this is going to apply to everyone because we're all in that same situation, is what I've seen to be most effective is we can often carry constantly that, are we getting the best deal? Do we need to negotiate? And what I would encourage, instead of carrying that energy burden all the time, is to decide once a month, once a year, this is the month that I spend looking at all my expenses and renegotiating them all. So you don't do it constantly. And even then, if you get advertised throughout the year, you don't get tempted. Just go, no, I look at this once a year. That's my month. Maybe it's November. We're here. I'm going to renegotiate all of them, and then I'll do them again next year. That would just be a good practice to kind of add in, make it your money November or something. And then some people do it money May because it's kind of before the end of the tax year. So yeah, whatever works for you, but yeah, have a month. I think that's brilliant. Sort of, and we'll touch on that a little bit next week, as well as thinking about what are some of those systems, easy systems that you can sort of introduce, or sometimes rituals can be more enticing for people. System sounds like it's a bit hard, but we'll try and, you know, they're little practices, little things that you can do that help you along the way. So that's fabulous. And yes, Kelly, I acknowledge too, what's important I know that we do need to keep an eye to the long term, because whatever we're doing now does feed into the long term, and you want to have an idea about that. I did earlier in the year, I did a webinar about long-term financial planning and considerations and thoughts, and also included a worksheet that can help you with that. So
Okay.
I might see if Alison might be able to send that out to you, the link to it, and the worksheets as well. But
Perfect.
you can,
Thank you.
I think everybody has access to those recordings anyway. But we'll probably run another one next year as well, because that's really important, because what we're doing now does feed into the long term. But I think I can hear you're making some really great financial decisions. You're just kind of wanting to know that what you're doing is kind of leading you towards that end goal, you know. Yeah, no, that's great. And these kind of systems and rigor is only going to help. So yeah, that's fabulous. Lovely. So I can just see, thanks for writing on there, cool, Matt. So it's bringing it, so for you it's increasing your awareness around that money is important, and that's not a bad thing, because again, you know, linking in with that belief that, you know, money is the root of all evil. Well, it's not. Money is just money. It doesn't have any emotional connotation other than what you give it. And also it's the value of it is what you give it. So you choose. You're either going to make it horrible and hard, or you can actually make it a positive part of your life, and you can have a positive relationship with it. So I think that's brilliant. And for you, so for you're kind of at a stage where you're going to try and be really frugal, because I know that you're you know, you're trying to pay off some debts and you know, get yourself into a good financial position moving forward. So that's really appropriate as well. So again, everybody's going to have different things about what this process has kind of made them aware of. But yeah, just wanting to kind of prompt you to think about that. As we go into now, what I've kind of tried to oh, thanks, Matt. Your little, I was going to say, I'm not sure how you undo that, but you knew how to do it. So what I want you to do now, having now that sort of increased awareness about where you are, it's highlighted to you and given you the information to demonstrate and reinforce, okay, there are particular things that I want to change. I want you to now, and you're not going to do it right now, but I want you to, after this webinar, to hopefully think about and create some really good goals for yourself for the next 12 months. So what I've done here is just kind of created 3 generic stages or phases that you could use to describe somebody's financial situation. So the first one is, and it's tricky finding terms that, but I also wanted to link into the emotion, but hopefully not trigger a negative one. But often people who are in debt, and I'm talking about consumer debt here, feel like they're sinking. So if you're somebody who is in that situation and who has, for example, credit card debt or car loans, things that have costly repayments, you'd probably be sort of generalized, but, you know, putting in that first category. So you're in that area of feeling like you're sinking. So your focus, I would be encouraging, would be about, you know, solvency and being debt free. So this is where, of course, we all want to get to the stage of having stability and security and then building wealth. But in this next 12 months, it's really important that we don't get muddled and distracted by some of those other longer term goals. I really want you to focus on what are the specific things you're going to do in this next 12 months. So for somebody in that situation, these are really just high level ideas, but for yourselves, it would be you thinking about the specifics behind these and what's really relevant to your situation. But if you are in that situation, you would be, you know, some sensible things to do would be to create a 1 month just in case fund. So 1 month's worth of expenses. So that's sometimes talked about as an emergency fund. So that is really important because it prevents you from getting further into debt. Getting rid of the credit cards, paying them off as quickly as possible. I also had an earlier webinar this year that gave you some strategies about how to pay off your debt quickly. So you can go back and have a look at that one as well. And obviously what goes along with this sort of stage in somebody's financial life is obviously a lot of anxiety as well. So part of your goal would be to reduce that anxiety. So there's obviously the actions, the money actions you can take, like building up that emergency fund, cutting up the credit card, working out, you know, the payment plan that you're going to be able to achieve, but also looking at some self-care strategies around the anxieties that you might have even some of the underlying behaviours that perhaps triggered you or were sort of supporting in terms of getting you into that debt situation. So really working on some of those as well. So maybe you might feel like you've got a bit of a reckless spending habit, finding some help and support with that as well. So they might be some ideas of what a goal might look like. And people who might have studied goals and things like that before might be looking at these as well. We're going to go through and also talk about what makes a really good goal, because I want you guys to set some really powerful goals, and these aren't specific enough, which we'll go into in our next slide, but these are just sort of general sort of starting point ideas to give you some ideas. So as sort of a second phase that you might be in, so if you don't have debt, or maybe you've just moved out of being in that debt position, you've paid all of your credit card debts and your consumer loans, you might be in a phase where what I'm sort of describing here is floating. So you're wanting to sort of stabilize, get security, and to do that, I'd be encouraging some goals around, increasing that just in case or emergency fund to 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, because that obviously gives you that stability and security if things change in your life. So if work changes, health reasons, for example, you've got that flexibility, having that fund and just parking it somewhere in a high interest account, which I know isn't really high at the moment, but somewhere that's accessible, is going to give you that stability and security. At this stage, you might also be thinking about saving for a home deposit, wanting to sort of give yourself that more security and reliability in terms of somewhere to live and putting down your roots. So this stage might be then working out, okay, how much do I need to save? How much could I save in 12 months to work towards that goal of purchasing a home? Also looking at things like insurances, because obviously they link in with these focus areas of stability and security as well. And then again, looking at perhaps you might be wanting to feel less stressed about money, and having time to consider what are those things that are causing you stress. So again, you'll see with all of mine, we're looking at what are the financial things, the goals that we want to achieve, but also the corresponding emotional health of ourself as well, to look at, to make sure that together both of those, we're improving the health of both of those, and not only the financial situation but our emotional health. So looking at what is causing you financial stress, and then obviously implementing ways or support systems to help with that as well. And then the third category of sort of situation that you might be in the sort of the flying stage, where you've built some wealth, but you're wanting to continue to build and preserve it as well. And I would be encouraging here, so some typical goals might again be sort of increasing that just in case emergency fund to 6 to 12 months. So again, some of these ideas would depend upon age. So certainly as you get older, and if you're approaching retirement, you want to make sure that you do have a larger emergency fund that's liquid and readily accessible. But sometimes for people who are also at a stage where they have young children, or they're in jobs that they don't feel as secure, or maybe it might take them longer to find a job if they were to lose their job, it's important to have that extra amount of money set aside for those circumstances. You might be looking to expand a business. That might be part of your financial goals as well, or buy a rental property, buy another rental property, maybe Kelly, or whatever it might be. And then looking at the emotional side again, so looking at how you can feel more confident and capable financially. What are some of the things that you can do in order to support yourself to do that as well? So this was kind of just a bit of a high level kind of idea of what are some of the goals that you might be setting for yourself. But obviously, having gone through that first process of identifying your specific financial situation and obviously life situation, these goals would be very different, and you would be customizing those, but they're just to give you a little bit of a starting point. But very important when we're looking at goals, which I'm sure, I was just reading Matt's comments here as well. Lovely, yes. So I'm glad that you appreciated my little water, which is often good for money too, because we're often very I'm very big on making sure that we're accommodating the emotions around money, because it's the biggest thing that we get stressed about. Yeah, really important there. So I'm sure many of you, obviously at the advanced stages that you are in your studies, have come across this acronym of SMART before. So this is probably just a reminder for most of you, but for some of you might not have seen it. So hopefully it's also going to add some value. But really, in terms of setting some powerful financial goals for yourself, and remember, I really want you to focus them on just the next 12 months. A really good practice, best practice is to make sure that they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And you can see that there's sometimes differing words that are interchangeably used within that acronym, which are also just as helpful and meaningful, but really important that when you are sitting down to work out, okay, what is it that I want to do in the next 12 months? That being very precise about what you want to achieve. So not just saying, well, I want to feel better about my money, or I want to save more. That's a great starting point, but we need to drill down into that to make it really specific. And then once we're very specific about what we want to achieve, when we come back next week, we can actually look at, okay, so how are we going to do that? So the really the nitty gritty, the detail, right down to, how many dollars might you be saving every week? Where are you going to put it? How are you going to support yourself? Are you going to do an automatic transfer out of one account into another? So we'll get into all of the how next week, but we want to take some time this week to think about and really get into the detail of what are the specific goals that I want to achieve. So really precise about what it is that you're going to achieve, and that it must be measurable. So not just I'm going to save a lot of money as I've got there, because it's not measurable and it's not motivating. You're not going to know if you're halfway there or if you've already achieved it or not. So you've got to be really, really clear about what that saving goal is. I want to save $5,000 by the 30th of June. And you're going to say why as well, because that's going to help you to motivate you to do it as well. It's important that whatever you set for yourself is also achievable. So no point setting a goal to say I'm going to save $100,000 by the end of next year if you're just not earning that amount of money at the moment. I'm all for stretch targets and big sky thinking and what is possible, and there is a place for that as well, and I certainly encourage that. But what we're doing here is looking at what are the realistic and achievable things that we can do given our current state and what we're doing. Although as I say that, sorry, was somebody raising their hand? Is that little sound? No, we're all good. As I say that, what might be part of your how in achieving the goal you set for yourself this week, it may be a change. So it may be that you look for different work or you do modify what you're doing. So that's, just a side note. But yes, absolutely. We've got to make sure that the goal that we're setting for ourselves is really achievable. So I've just got the example here. So creating savings goal of $500 a month. If you've only got $200 a month of disposable income after your bills, it's just not going to be achievable. So there's no point setting yourself up for something that's you're not going to achieve. It needs to be relevant and realistic as well. So it kind of feeds into those, like Kelly and Matt, you're saying, thinking about the longer term as well. So we're obviously going to have a mind to that, but they're going to be relevant and supportive of a longer term vision for ourselves as well. So whilst I'm not talking through it here, you can certainly give yourself some space to kind of even sketch out what are some of the high level things you might like to achieve in the next 10 years, and then what you set yourself for the next 12 months. Really important that yes, it does sort of feed into that as well. And I guess the example I've got here as well is that it may not be in the next 12 months that you can save up the full amount for a house deposit, but you want to make sure that it's clearly, you can see that it's clearly going to help you to get along the way. So maybe you can only say $5,000, but you know that that $5,000 is helping you to achieve that longer term goal of buying a home in, say, the next 5 years. So that's really important. To obviously have it time bound and trackable, just like the example that I gave. So having a specific date is really helpful. Obviously we're going to have, you know, there will be flexibility and you're not going to beat yourself up if you don't achieve it, but if you don't set these goals and define dates, then you're never going to achieve anything. So it's really important to just, and you'll find that the power of actually writing it down, and you'll see in the worksheets that there's a tab that's titled My Financial Priorities, and that's where I'd like you to list those out for the next 12 months, keeping in mind these SMART dimensions here. So I'm sure that's really quite just a reminder to everybody. And this is the tab in which you can do it. So you jump in, and I've just given some examples here, really sort of generalized ones. So increase emergency fund to equal 1 month's worth of living expenses by December 2023. Anybody want to share what you might change about that one to make it even more powerful, or what you might modify, having just heard about or been reminded of those SMART elements? What might you change about that goal?
It needs to probably be a bit more specific, like what have you got now versus what do you need and what is the difference?
Yes, that's important, definitely. So you're going to think about what is, so you're thinking in a year's time, are my living expenses going to be more expensive? And you want to build up to having 1 month's worth of those. That's certainly a consideration, but I like it. It definitely needs to be specific. So I'd like to see the actual dollar value that you've actually calculated. Okay, what is 1 month's worth of living expenses? Because we've got that information now. You certainly got it based on the last 12 months. But yes, Kelly, you're correct. You'd want to factor in some sort of a CPI increase, even if it's an assumption over, you know, generally how much of my expenses going to increase over the next 12 months. Factor that increase in, and then, yeah, be clear about what is that dollar value. Yep, that's brilliant. Does anybody have an emergency fund? This is a nice one just to check in with as well, just while we're on the topic of emergency funds.
I have an emergency fund.
You don't have one?
I do.
You do? Okay, cool. And how much worth of living expenses do you have?
Probably
not
about,
the dollar value, but
I was going to say,
yeah, no,
very specific today.
No, don't tell me that, but tell me, is it 1 month or is it 3 months?
No, probably about 6 months.
6 months, okay, cool. And are you feeling like that does give you a good sense of security, or why did you decide to have that amount of money?
That's how much I saved. And then I was like, I will just put it here, and then we've got that. And then also like looking at my insurances with life insurance and trauma insurance and all that other stuff, how long it took for that sort of payout to happen. Like if you were doing, you know, if I hurt myself at work or something, it was, I think it was 3 months until you could actually start claiming things. So how long could I stump up this joint and our family for that until the other stuff kicked in, just in case it was something like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that's the perfect way to think through. So a lot of people just take whatever somebody says. Oh, they said it should be 3 months, or they said it, you put aside 6 months. Okay, they're just figures, but you need to think through your own situation and what would happen and what you would be comfortable with. So you're exactly right. So yes, so if I was in this situation, it would take me 3 months in order to receive any payment for that. So I need to make sure that I can cover myself for that. But you would also giving yourself another 3 month buffer is really important, because, you know, these things can delay. And that's why I was saying, depending on also who you're looking after, who you're responsible for, can impact that decision about how much you would want to put in your emergency or just in case fund. So I can typically see for families as well, sometimes people will have 6 to 12 months expenses in there. It may be that somebody is only one person working, which also makes the family a little bit more risky. If you've got 2 people working, it's a little bit less. And then also depending on your particular industry and the work that you do, is it hard to find another job? Thinking through what would that mean, and certainly doing that with your partner, and yeah, coming up with what is a good amount. That sounds really sensible what you've done there, Kelly. So yeah, no, I wasn't going to ask for the dollar value. So good. So yeah, I definitely encourage to have that emergency fund. Not only psychologically does it give you peace of mind, you know, you wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh no, what if this happens? That's certainly going to help you, but it's literally going to help you as well, having it there. And it's not a waste just having it sitting in a high interest account and serving that purpose. So again, the second one here, I've got pay off all high fee debt, credit card Afterpay by December 23rd, the next year. Again, what would we be doing to improve that one? So anybody else want to share? Rachel or Christy? I haven't heard from you. So Matthew's saying, yes, you've got to save hard. But what would you change about that goal to make it more powerful? Okay, good. So Matt's including there as well the when. So we've got the when of December, but to make it even more powerful, put a date in, put an actual date. So that, and you'll be surprised how much, even subconsciously, you'll be motivated to get there to achieve it. But you also, again, there's no quantity around this. So I want to see that you've done the calculation, you've actually worked out how much is my total lump sum amount of debt that I'm going to pay off. You'd work out, okay, what's my total? So you might have $20,000 worth of credit card debt. And over the next 12 months, your goal is to actually reduce that debt down to, say, 15,000. And that's your goal. So be really specific about it. So then when we come in next week, we can actually look at having that really tangible goal, be able to describe and put together a system that will support you. So yeah, really good. Yes, Rachel.
I'm just wondering, with our student debt, whereabouts would that sit?
So your student debt is a different type of debt, and I'm glad that you've brought it up. We actually did in the webinar that I'm referring to about debt earlier in the year. I talked and actually did a whole one about HEX as well. HEX is a different type of debt because it's not your high interest, high fee. It's getting, I know it does get adjusted by CPI, and so it is growing, but you have no additional fees. It's also unique in the sense that if you don't pay it off, it doesn't get passed on to anybody. So it changes people's thinking around the prioritization of that debt. So I would encourage you to not put it ahead of any of your other debts. That it's fine that it's sitting at the lower priority, and you're certainly looking at paying off all of your other high interest, high fee. So I'm talking about credit cards, Afterpay, whatever other products they bring out to try and make you get money that's not yours too early. So these things where they pay you before you get paid, please avoid those at all cost. So those are the things that because they're so costly. So we want to make sure that they're paid off first. And then you would be looking at paying off your home, paying off investment properties, and your HEX debt is most, just let it reduce as you're earning. It will slowly reduce itself. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Yeah, oh good, cool. And then the next one down here, I've got an example of saving 20% deposit to buy a home. Great goal, but again, we want to make it powerful. So let's change it to, let's be really specific about what is that dollar value. So again, this might link into a longer term goal because we might not be able to achieve that in 1 year, depending on our situation, but it might be that you need to save up $100,000. So for that deposit. So then we can look at, okay, in the next 12 months, how much of that can we save? So it might be, and it's all up to your situation. So it might be $30,000 you're able to save, just pulling it out of the air. But we need to look at, is that realistic? So yeah, define exactly how much you're going to save, by when, and then next week we're going to look at, okay, what are all the things that are going to help us? What are our levers? What are our options help us to do that. Again, yep, saving for a holiday, really broad and general again. We want to know exactly how much we're going to give that holiday a budget. So we need to know, we need to do a little bit of research to understand. So it might be friends and family. A lot of people have this after COVID now, wanting to reconnect with people they haven't seen for a long time, a really important goal. Obviously that needs to be considered alongside your other goals. But if that's what you've decided you really want to achieve in the next 12 months, really giving that some quantity. So researching flights might be differently priced now to what you may have seen in the past. So making sure you've got that updated data, understand how much is it going to cost, when are you going to travel? So then, is this feasible? Then going back and looking at your situation, how much do I need to save in order to achieve that goal? So I know, so this is most likely a bit of a reminder to everybody, but nonetheless very valuable to when you sit down and you've gone through that process of increasing your awareness. Okay, this is where I am, and now looking at that, I know what I want to achieve in the next 12 months. So you're going to set yourself some really nice specific goals. How many goals is everybody going to set for themselves? Or how many do you think is a good number for the next 12 months? Rachel's thinking of 2. It's not a bad number. It's better than 20. So I'd definitely not be encouraging 20. So I'm liking seeing 2. 2 is good. And yes, a lower number, I think. Lovely. Yeah, Matt's dividing the year into quarters. Brilliant. That's a really great way to do it as well. Is having that one high level goal for your 12 months and then breaking it down further. That's brilliant. So then you've got 4 sub goals that maybe feed into that one major goal, or you might have 4 specific goals that you can achieve in each quarter. So that's another brilliant way of dividing it. I probably wouldn't encourage any more than 4. I think that's enough to give you that focus and drive for the next 12 months. Obviously, as I've just described there, one goal might become sub goals. You might have little underlying things that you can do, because obviously we've acknowledged there's the financial aspects and actions we're going to take. But we're also going to take actions to support our mental health and our emotional well-being around money. So often there's going to be a couple of different things that we're going to do to achieve a goal. We've been very clear here in the examples I've got that they're the financial aspects. But what would happen alongside that is if you've increased your emergency fund, for example, or you've created one, that what you've also achieved by the end of that is you've increased your financial stability, which is wonderful, and hopefully alleviated some financial anxiety as well. So really great to sort of also identify that there's some of the outcomes that you'll obtain through these goals. Wonderful. So I've just added in, I think I've just got some examples here, which I think just looking at the time that we have left now, you'll have these slides that will be sent to you as part of the link. So I'm not going to go through that example again. We're talking about, this is kind of saying how you can break it down. So if you have got, like Matt saying, if you've got a 12-month goal that you can then reduce into maybe a weekly goal, and that's then becomes your sub goal. So we've got here that you might have saved $500, and then this is, by whatever the date is in 9 months time, that you're dividing it and then saying, okay, that means I need to save $12.82 or $13 a week in order to achieve that. So then you can kind of do that check-in. Is this feasible? Do I have that extra at the moment? You might not, but then you think, no, I really want to achieve this goal. So then you look back and say, okay, where is that? How am I going to find that money? It's going to be a matter of, and this is sort of stepping into next week, we're going to explore all of our different options around how we can increase, obviously, our income side and how we can reduce our expenses. There are 2 major levers. And then we've also got assets that we can buy and sell as well that can impact our achievement of goals. So yeah, really good to sort of break out bigger goals into smaller ones. So please, now having been hopefully inspired and a little bit more excited about what you want to achieve in the next 12 months, we might have talked about them, you might have ideas in your mind now from going through this, but please add them to the financial wellbeing worksheets. There's nothing more powerful than you actually constructing and creating your own goal and writing it out in your own words and thinking it through. And having it listed officially somewhere that you can come back to and review is incredibly powerful. So please go away and do that. Hopefully before our session next week. So then you're going to come back and you'll have some really nice specific goals, some of which you might be able to share with the group, and then we can talk through how we're going to actually achieve those goals. So look at in the worksheets, there's one final tab that's called Looking Forward. So it has a similar sort of budget style part to it, where you can look at, okay, what are the inflows and outflows for the coming year? So it's a sort of a budgeting forward-looking process. And it also has a cash flow function to it as well. So as Kelly was talking earlier, some of our expenses occur annually or quarterly, and we want to make sure that we can manage our cash flows and also manage that budget in order to help support ourselves to achieve the financial goals that we've set. So that's what we'll come back and do next week. So yes, please go away if you haven't already. Use what we've learned today to create some really powerful goals. Somewhere between 1 and 4 goals would be brilliant. And then we'll come back next week and look at how we're going to allow you and enable you to achieve those goals through the final tab in those financial wellbeing worksheets. And that's all we're going to go through today. So I hope that that's been really valuable. Again, just I think Alison's already added up the information through the chat, but I'm here as a financial coach counselling service. I've partnered with the SCPA and have been doing it for a year now. And yeah, happy to speak with you one-on-one if there's anything you want to just talk through in terms of your own personal situation. So I'm a CPA, it's all confidential, private conversations that we can have. I'm completely independent, so I'm not going to sell you anything. There's no catches or anything, just really here because we knew from the surveys that financial topics were really causing students a lot of stress, and wanting to provide some additional services and resources to help with that. So I'm here to do that, and yeah, always happy to connect with you. You can contact the helpline or email me through my SCU email address, and we can make booking time. So thank you all for coming. It was so nice to see sort of familiar faces or names coming back again. And I look forward to seeing you next week as well as we finish off the wellbeing series.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Hope to see everyone next week with some financial goals that we can talk about. Any last comments? Did you want to say anything, Matthew?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. Growing up, felt really in the dark about money and just kind of neglected, ignored it, said, oh, I'll be all right, I'll just be provided for. And now there's a shift in taking responsibility. You know, maybe the goal over the next 12 months is to be financially independent. And that would be a huge shift into how I relate to and and make meaning and that kind of thing from money. So thank you.
That's brilliant.
I don't think you may not realize just how important these workshops are to me. So thank you, Liz, and thank you, Alison.
Lovely. Thank you, Matt.
That's great feedback. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I might finish off the recording there. I hope to see everyone next week for the final workshop talking about goals. Okay.
Please.